is the Absolute handheld gaming device. It's a cloud-based device that's super affordable, and it's got some pros and cons. It may not be for everyone, but it may be for you. Who knows? Let's have a look now. So the Absolute runs Android. The interface is very nice and slick, very easy to use. The device itself feels pretty nice in the hand, and it does feel very well built. It's also really light. It is very compact, so very, very portable for when you're on the go. Wi-Fi permitting, of course. And it also comes in a really nice branded case. The highlight of this device for me is the screen. It's a 1080p display with really rich colours that makes playing certain retro games, for instance, very appealing. The screen has a 60Hz refresh rate, and it's very, very premium for the price. I think in terms of the price of this device, it's the best screen I've seen in something this affordable. You can also expand the storage if you like, so you can add a lot of ROMs on there if you're into emulation, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But out of the box, you can get either a 32GB or a 62GB version with expandable storage. Personally, this is down to very much personal taste, so you may not feel the same. I don't like mismatched analog design on the thinner devices, so the Switch suffers for this for me, and this device does too. I find it very comfortable on my left hand but less comfortable on my right hand, particularly for certain games like first-person shooters. I think the way that you have to use your right thumb can sometimes be quite restricting, so when I'm playing like Overwatch or whatever on the Switch, I do have like an external grip to make it a little bit more comfortable. I personally much prefer a matched analog layout like the Steam Deck, or if it's offset, at least give me like a good sort of wrist rest like you can get on the ROG Ally. Personal preference, but this may not be the device for first-person shooters anyway, so that may not even matter. There's a pretty hefty battery inside at 5,200 mAh, and I find that you can game really comfortably for loads of time. Like, I think the official rating is 8 hours. I think the most I've done in one session is maybe 3 or 4, but that's not because the battery's died, that's just because I've given up. Of course, this really helps because of cloud gaming, so the device that's doing all the work is not your device, so the battery goes a very long way. If you are playing Android games or emulated games, I imagine the battery life will be a little bit less long, but for the main purpose of this device, which is cloud gaming, you can game and game for blooming ages. It's brilliant. So we have full access to the Android Play Store, which I think is always a bonus, and you don't have to faff with sideloading anything or anything like that. But there is a caveat with Android gaming. Unless the game takes Bluetooth controllers, you don't get access to the physical buttons when it comes to playing Android games. So things like Call of Duty Mobile or Slay the Spire, for instance. Because it's optimized for touchscreen, you still use the touchscreen and you can't actually use the controller, which is a pain in the backside. If the game does allow for external controls, then you're absolutely fine. The proprietary sort of OS that's like overlaid onto Android that Absolute have made is very nice. It looks quite like a Steam Deck library, so you should be able to find all your games very easily, and it is optimized for the control, so you don't have to use the touchscreen if you don't want to. Now, as an Android device rather than a cloud-based device, it's not the most powerful tablet in the world. You're not going to be playing like harder to run games on Android like Genshin Impact or whatever. It's more for your basic and mid-range games, which is fine, but just keep that in mind. If you are looking at this device, think of it as cloud first, that's the primary purpose, and then the Android gaming is just a happy little add-on, because it's not the most powerful. And I like the concept of this, because if you're taking this, say, on holiday where you know you're gonna have good Wi-Fi, when you are on the plane, for instance, where you don't have good Wi-Fi, you can use your offline games like your emulation and your Android games, and then when you get to the destination, you've got your cloud games. So it is good to have, but don't expect the earth, if that makes sense. So the main function, of course, is cloud gaming. Let's have a look at this now. This is always down to your tolerance for latency and also, of course, your internet connection. This is probably the smoothest device I've ever used for cloud gaming. The connection is very, very solid if your home connection is. However, I think for competitive gaming, like say you're playing Warzone, it's capable of running it absolutely fine, but because it's such a competitive game where it's like a millisecond in a gunfight could mean life or death, I don't think it's the best medium in which to play these sorts of games. So I think this handheld is great depending on what kind of games you're into. I think if you play Hogwarts Legacy or Starfield, or maybe some shooting games, but not like completely like split-second competitive games, like Gears of War would be fine, High on Life would be fine, etc. But just bear that in mind that it's a fundamental quirk of cloud gaming that there will inevitably be a little bit more latency. So I just don't want you like rage throwing this at the wall if you get taken out by a noob on COD. But for the right gaming experiences, it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. You could in fact kid yourself that you are just playing on a tiny Xbox, really, because games that don't need that split-second input run exactly as they would on a console. Out of the box, I was up and running on Xbox Cloud Gaming in like under 5 minutes. The setup is so intuitive and easy to use. In terms of cloud gaming, I think the Xbox Cloud Gaming is probably the best bang for buck because you can subscribe to this even if you don't have an Xbox. You don't need your console on like you do for your PlayStation Remote Play. You've got a great library of Microsoft games to play with, including things like Gears of War, High on Life, yada yada yada. There's loads to choose from. It's probably the most cost-effective gaming setup. Like, it's very, very affordable to get up and running with really good AAA titles. So I see myself using this for campaign games primarily. You know, games that you can sink loads of hours into and maybe you want to continue using them on the go. I think that is primarily what this device would excel at. So who is this for? And I suppose who is cloud gaming for in general? I think it's for households that fight over the TV. I think this is a very cost-effective way to get several people gaming in the household at once without having to buy a whole new telly, a whole new console. I think it's also for people that like to maybe mooch on their phone when they're watching TV. This is definitely a huge step up from that because you could get access to some really good games while you're chilling on the couch. I think it's also good for people who travel, but they know they've got good internet at the other side. So like if you know you go into a hotel that's got a good Wi-Fi, you're laughing. If you're traveling to lots of different places, it could be very hit and miss. So it would not be my first choice as a travel device if I wasn't sure about the internet on the other side. But if it's a place that I go to regularly, maybe it's for a work commute or whatever, it's somebody else's house that you stay at and they've got good internet, it works brilliantly in those circumstances. I also think maybe it's for people who want to play select titles on the Xbox but don't want to invest in an Xbox. Like I have a friend who wants to play Starfield, but it's currently an Xbox exclusive, and buying an Xbox for like one game every blue moon isn't really cost effective, but subscribing to Xbox Cloud for a month or two while you complete it, suddenly it becomes quite appealing. Like the cost of maybe 3 months of Xbox Cloud is cheaper than a 60 quid game. If you don't have an Xbox, this is a good way to get into those titles. I also think this could be a good emulation device if you set your expectations to sort of mid-range games. Like if you want to play Pokemon on the go with a lovely, rich, beautiful screen, this could work very, very well for you. So things I love. It's very stylish and it does feel like a very premium device in the hand. I love that it comes with a really good case that is perfectly fitting to the device so it doesn't make it any more bulky. The battery life seems stunning for cloud gaming. I think if you were playing sort of an hour or two every night, you could basically get a week's worth of usage out of this without having to charge it, which is crazy because like every time I use my Steam Deck it goes on charge overnight. I got some very good cloud-based gaming experiences through this. There were many, many times when I was playing Starfield, for example, where you forget that you're playing a cloud-based game. It just feels like you have a little console in your hand and it's very, very cool. There were times when more the audio rather than the visuals would stutter a little bit, but that's down to the connection I had at the time rather than anything that the device was doing wrong. Again, this is all down to your tolerance for these sorts of quirks. They're very affordable, you can play really high quality games, but there are quirks with cloud gaming. Such is life. My overall opinion is for the price of this, which is probably one of the cheapest big screen handhelds on the market. Bloody brilliant for the price. You get loads for the price. What I love less, the ergonomics, I'm not the biggest fan of, as I've said a few times in this video. I shall not linger on that point. I think the Switch style analog sticks, as in like, you know, they're quite small to the device, doesn't lend itself to games where you need to be very precise. I think these sorts of physical controls are very good for maybe side scrollers. I like the D-pad, I like the buttons. The analog sticks, it's not going to be my first choice for playing like COD or anything. So for me, because I am lucky enough to have a Steam Deck and an ROG Ally, I don't think cloud-based gaming has a home in my setup, but I think it could work great in a family situation. It could be brilliant for a lot of people. So I think if you're curious about cloud gaming and it's something that you want to get into, the level of entry for this device is so affordable. It's probably the best option at the moment if you do want to try cloud gaming. And then when you couple that with the emulation ability and access to the Play Store, you could even use it as a media device when you're traveling. There's a lot to love at this price point for this device, I think. So check them out, I've left a link in the description below, and check out some other handheld videos on my channel while you're here. Why not?